So actually what I can report about is the occupied city of Berlin was an important place to influence Berlin's youth, culture, fashion, and the local society, okay? So this is actually about my own history. So it's quite personal stories and interesting. For me, it was funny experiences in the past. As I was born and raised in the western part of Berlin, I will focus now on my individual prospection on how deeply American music and culture has had a solid impact on me. It is my pleasure to give you insights on how people of different races and socioeconomic backgrounds broke through borders to create a new worldwide unique city profile. Of terms of West and East during the Cold War affected the world for more than 40 years. These years between 1949 and 1990 changed not only the local people, but the world forever. I truly believe in this. We have been controlled, shaped, and entertained by our armed forces, the American, the British, the French, and in the West, and in the East it was the Russian forces. Okay, so 4 of them. In the West we had BFBS, which is British radio, and AFN radio that influenced me when I was a youngster. TV series like Bonanza, running from 1959 up to 1973, did the rest. To mix music with fashion and adorable, cool characters. Different styles of music such as country, rockabilly, blues, and rock and roll infected my ear and made me into the man I'm today. A salesman, a musician running his own music agency, selling bands to or hiring bands to events for corporate shows. Usually, learning about history is about hard facts, such as dates, objects, or persons, etc., most of the time, but it's the so-called soft facts, like emotions, that brings history alive to us. Feelings associated with our own experiences in the past are blooming the flower. So let me take you back a couple of years, way back into the 1970s. Picture me as an 8-year-old kid having 10 years older hippie sister and an 8-year-older big brother posing as a rocker back in the 70s. My brother had jeans and cowboy boots and was wearing massive white open curly long hair, smoking cigarettes and walking like a cat. I told my mother that I wanted shoes like him, like the cowboy things he had on his feet, like my brother and the people from, like Little Joe from Bonanza, etc. But my mom said, no, you're much too young for that. To me, the early 1970s have been the same like the late 1960s, where dope and Easy Rider had outgrown the 1950s jeans revolution. My siblings had psychedelic posters of Kent Heed, a band, by the way, maybe you don't know them, or CCR, who's coming, they're coming to this house, by the way, in September. So that'll be something, at least for me. A big red tongue of the Rolling Stones hanging on the wall, and Bob Marley with a joint grinning at me from the walls, while I had the Sandman sitting around with a pacified smile. Until the 1980s, disco and the hustle dominated the charts and dance floors. Fashion was full of color, glamour, and glitter, and music acts such as Kiss, the Kiss Monsters, I would like to say. They didn't scare me, but I didn't like monsters at all at the time. Don't forget, I was a little boy. On TV, we had quiz showmasters such as Wim Tölke of Der Große Preis, that was his show, for 20 years running 20 years. Can't do that no more today. Looking like a dressed-up salesman. He was the star in Germany, and we had big dance reviews and only a few channels to switch. Watching Wim Tolke in a show and Bonanza on TV, I sure recognize differences in fashion taste to our local taste. So this was the setting when I was a boy. Well, my father owned a big trading company, and one of the employees was a driver delivering goods to my father's customers. Once in a while, my father did send me along with him on trips to keep me busy and quiet after school when I was a little older. My dad's office and storage rooms had been in one half of the building, and the private rooms had been on the other side. So business and our private section have been almost one and the same playground for me. Anyway, while driving with the driver, delivering goods, he was listening to the radio. Now this guy was listening to the Armed Forces Network broadcasting station without knowing any English. I mean, the language, okay? Which was an interesting fact, by the way. I didn't understand any word either, what they have been talking back then. So we both didn't understand a word, so I was asking him, why are you listening to this? He did answer, weil die Elvis spielen. Zeug vom King und so. That means, because they play Elvis, stuff of the king. I said, Elvis and Roy Orbison are still on the top charts of the 1970s, but AFN did spin Elvis early recordings as well. Rockabilly Country, that was a routine on the radio, was a weekly routine format with David Simmons on British Forces Broadcasting Service, BFBS. If nothing was up on the radio, the driver, the deliverer, was using one of his audio tapes, the little cassettes with rock and roll music of Elvis, of course. So I asked the driver, why do you play it? Why not trying other stations on the radio? Why only BFBS and AFN or your tape? And if so, where can I get this music? Can I buy it here? He was sure that they'd had a mission to obtrude us, their music, to get away from our military marches and the stiff movings. So I was hooked. Wow, a king that wants us not to march? This is the truth, I'm not kidding. So that was like 30 years after the war, and still I had this strange view on things, I think. One day, I think I must have been a teenager by then, I was washing and cleaning my dad's car. I was listening to the radio, to AFN. Some guy of my age came by asking me, what song is this? I said, I don't know. What do you mean? He did reply, that's the stuff you're listening to now that comes out of the radio. What is this? I did answer, I don't know, it's radio. They're playing this kind of music all day and talking like this all day. I just like the music, so I listened to the music. Washing the car, I didn't catch the title of the song or the band's name. So this other boy was a little confused. What is AFN and how do you spell this AFN? I knew right away the infection had a strong impact on me. It became a natural thing to me, listening to a foreign language and different kind of music than the other kids on the block, in school too, and everywhere. Sure, we did have English in school, but none of my classmates been paying any much attention to this. The more prick-eared you are, the more you discover between the lines. So, for example, let's take a song from 1956 written by Otis Blackwell Johnson and Little Richard Penniman, called Long Tall Sally. Have you heard of that? Yeah. Let me quote, long tall Sally's built pretty sweet. She got everything that Uncle John need. Baby, ooh yeah, baby. Ooh baby, we have some fun tonight. Okay, if you think this is all nonsense, then you may have been listening to Little Richard's, you should have listened to Little Richard's pronunciation while he was lustful reporting on his new girlfriend. A censor said back then in 1956 on the radio, "How can I reject Long Tall Sally when I can't even understand what this stupid nonsense is all about?" Well, this is what rock and roll is all about. Suggestive, emotional lyrics. If you reduce the music down to the beat only, keeping the message out, Long Tall Sally can be just a dance. Or a woman's fashion store or something. This simple fact was hitting me big time when I was little. This makes me rock when I dance today or sing along some song like this today. Elvis died in August 1977, and I was shocked. Who is continuing to play rock and roll? I was asking myself. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band? Do they continue this kind of stuff? Just take those old records off the shelf. I'll sit and listen to them by myself. Today's music ain't got the same soul. I like that old time of rock and roll. That's a quote from this song of Bob Seger. But it was basically rock with the roll. As we do have a strong family tradition, my parents finally sent me to a music school in 1977 to learn classic serious music and to stop my Hottentottenkram, this Bedlam razzmatazz back then. I was 12, and immediately the stages on stage, I was out on stage with a trio. I barely was able to plug the guitar in, but I could sing it loud and lustful like they did on the radio. So that was fun. It still is fun today. But we're talking about different cultural influences in Berlin than elsewhere. And of course, there was much more than fashion and music to be found in the American sector of West Berlin, the American people, the soldiers and their families and their social life, which was totally different to what we had in our block. The Romans did occupy Germany, but I guess they didn't have as many bases as the US Army from 1945 up to 1989. To live in an occupied city, caged by a wall, watched by vicious dogs with reeled out claws, is a tremendous difference, I think, to just watching a movie from Hollywood or visiting the US as a tourist. American life was to be found in the 7 German countries: Bremen, Hessen, Niedersachsen, Baden-Württemberg, Nordrhein-Westfalen, Rheinland-Pfalz, and Bayern, Bavaria. From the total of over 91,000 armed forces members, it was more than 66,000 folks from the US forces. After the war, West Berlin depended upon West Germany for food, consumer goods, machinery, and raw materials. 1962, our city got a wall around the West, and Berlin West was completely isolated and surrounded by East. That's why my friends in West Germany said I was as close to Poland as butter to bread. If they'd come to the West and the East, as they say, it was only for one reason: to get away from the Bundeswehr services, okay, the army, our army. The Berliners have been unburdened from this kind of service. Entry of Allied personnel into East Berlin, the Soviet zone, was prohibited except with applied permission, means waiting in a huge line, and documentation like stamp and paper, etc. through designated checkpoints and over prescribed routes. Well, for me, someone who was interested in music from the past and local history, etc., Sanssouci in Potsdam, for example, I did sense it as a shame to wait in line for hours to get a 3-day visitor permission to be able to take a day trip over there to the East. This was rejecting me from the Eastern system and people. There are folks, but I'd like to focus on non-political issues, if you please. To the average citizen, a bar or festival event was perfect for a first contact. I did spend my application and CV to the US Army application office, and they did hire me as their new VATman, the value-added tax clerk. Being a professional salesman, I became the value-added tax officer for Berlin. At Clay headquarters, at the US Army CFFMD, the Community Family Financial Management Division, during this period, working for the infantry at the headquarters and the Air Force at Tempelhof Airfield, I had the positive opportunity of living and working in 2 different worlds within 10-minute motorcycle ride from my home. I was a civilian employee with a white collar shirt and tie. My must phrase picking up the phone was, "Hello, ma'am or sir, this is the US Army CFFMD. This line is not secure. My name is Mr. Strauss. How can I help you?" After a short time of sentence, I got my daily routine and everything. But people, the more I got into it, the people said, "Excuse me, can you repeat this? What was this? Who am I calling? Who am I talking to?" So by then I knew I'm in it. I'm deeply in it. So that was interesting, you know. Remember, I was just 10 minutes away from home, from old Germany, where they bump you with a card in the shopping mall and not having a distance to you. That's different. Having access to 2 different worlds within a few miles, I experienced daily situations like the ones I just described. Shopping at a PX, which is the post exchange operated by the armed forces, offered many privileges and price and services. At the counter, they'd ask me, do you need a little longer to pick the right product, sir? What can I help you with, sir? While back in the German jungle of the unfriendly downtown local Kotterschnauze, the old guy from behind me was shoving his shopping cart into my legs, mumbling, "Nu mach mal ein bisschen schneller, eh?" If you understand that. Just do it a little faster. He was busy, I guess. I guess military tricks like camouflage clothing or an ambush wouldn't help to prevent embarrassing situations. But intercultural management classes and an occupied city like the former West Berlin. So much for that. Thanks for listening. Do you have any questions maybe that I can answer? Yes, please.
Before the 90s, there's lots of difference between East and West Berlin.
Absolutely.
And also the whole German. But what's the present situation? Still now, the German government is trying to solve all the problems, but I think that there's still now some difference between East and West.
Well, some of the Berliners, thank you for the question, some of the Berliners still have the wall in the head because we're trained like this. The older the people are, the more they have this trained wall in the head because they're trained like this, okay? Today I have friends of mine my age that don't go to the East, to the bars, to the clubs, because it's still the East to them, which is kind of strange, I think, like 25 years after the wall came down, okay? So you can imagine now things change, of course, within 25 years, but Somehow, the older the people are, the more unflexible they are. So to answer your question, I would say it's totally different now, but what was different for me when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, we had a wall, so you couldn't get away. It was like a cage. And this is, we still have all the multicultural things. We had them in the 60s, in the 70s, okay? All kinds of colors, all kinds of different people and businesses and services. That doesn't change, didn't change over the years. But everything is open now. Back then we had like community centers, American, British, French, or on the other side, the Russian community centers with the GI clubs and all this. Everything was kind of controlled and stacked into a cage. So I think we still have the same opportunities than back in the 70s, but it's different. It's more wide open now. It's more mixed. And this is a perfect thing. It was a shame during the last 40 years of the occupation, I think. Is that a good answer to your question, or did I went too far off for you? Yeah? Please.
Yeah, clearly there's like still like a bunch of differences, of course, between like the East and West, and like of course, like all of Germany, of course, in terms of more of like the like xenophobic phenomena that's been happening more towards like the East. But also, do you think the government has any type of influence on that, specifically for like in Berlin, for that difference? Because I know that like for example, between the East and the West, like on the West side, they have like the Hauptbahnhof on every single crosswalk, and it's a different one that's on like the East, and also the lighting for all the street lights is like a different look.
Well, that has to do with money, basically, because Berlin is not a rich city or country. It's a country, actually. But I think there is no other reason to that. It's, we still have that green, how do you call that, the Ampelmännchen in the traffic light, okay? Yeah, things like that, but they didn't change it because it's working. And
Those have been the same ones for like the last 25 years?
like the last 40 years, yes. I think none of them are reproduced or reset or anything. It's still there. So people don't have the money to set up a new traffic light, I guess. Any other question? Well then, thank you for your time.